What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I do hope you guys are well. A few weeks ago, I made a video just detailing my initial thoughts and experiences with World of Warcraft, and specifically Classic. The new anniversary realms have been my first iteration, I guess, my first real experience of World of Warcraft, as close to, I guess, the launch as it possibly can be, although it's never going to be the same. And to be brutally honest with you, I've been having a blast. I literally haven't stopped playing this. Me and my brother, actually, we live like a good few hours distance from each other. We've even started meeting up in real life and having like mini LAN parties with each other and bringing our laptops and PCs together to play in one room, which is really, really cool. We've never had that sort of connection before, and this game has really done that for us. So honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I am thankful for that experience. Most of the stuff that I've experienced in World of Warcraft Classic has been fantastic. It really has. From the journey, just even to getting to know the nuances of your classes, the world, it's been great. But there's been some points of contention throughout my process of leveling characters and exploring that just kind of griped me a little bit. So this video, I guess, is going to be specifically about the dungeon experience, but also more specifically about tanking and tanks within the dungeon experience. To any of you guys that have played Classic for any length of time, this obviously is going to be old news, but to me, I was kind of shocked at the sheer lack of tanks readily available to do dungeon content, right? I was like, my initial character was a rogue. I got to level 29, nearly 30, and just as much as I was loving the single player kind of RPG elements of a rogue, every time I tried to find myself getting into groups or tried to find a group for content to kind of do stuff that, I don't know, maybe I had certain quests to tick off in certain dungeons, it was taking forever. You know, sometimes upwards of an hour to even get a sniff at getting a group. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this is just what it's like, right? Maybe this is just normal. But I was like, look, I probably get 2, 3, maybe 4 hours at a push at a time to play this game. Do I want to spend the majority of that time hanging around in the hopes that I get a group? No, not really. So I kind of started to look into, well, if I'm truly going to try and understand why there is a drought, or why there's a lack of tanks, then the best thing to do is just to become one. So what you see before you is, of course, my druid, who's got tired of standing now. Now, before you guys say, look, druid is not the way to go, hybrid tax, jack of all trades, master of none, I get it. The reason why I went druid is because I kind of wanted to be as flexible as possible. I'm still completely new to the game. To me, it seemed like a good idea to kind of offer like this flexible, overarching aid in any situation, which I really like with a druid. But I'm fully aware that warriors are probably the better tank. Priests are, of course, the better healer, so on and so forth. But I thought I need to put myself into a tank's shoes. So I started progressing, as everyone does. You start leveling up, going through the motions, going through the zones, enjoying the quests, enjoying the ambience, because this game does that very well. It does the ambience really well. The world building, as much as the leveling is slow in Classic, it doesn't matter because the world is fantastic to be in. It really is. So I start to reach to a point where I'm entering dead mines. Not for the first time, but the first time on my druid, which I then opt to tank as bear form, right? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I can form the group really easily. There seems to be more healers than there are tanks. There's DPS that are readily readily available. Let's just do it. And then problems started to crop up a lot. And this isn't going to be some sort of summary. This is not going to be some sort of tier list or a list of excuses or reasons as to why I think tanking is a bit of a sore spot. And this might just be Classic. It might, with more expansions that have come out, I'm sure the game's improved, things might be different. And this might also be specific to druids. But when you're tanking, there are so many variables that are, yes, in your control, but so many other variables that are totally out of your hands. Now, what do I mean by that? In games like Final Fantasy XIV, and I'll use 14 as a prime example because that's where I've got the most time, it makes the most sense. In 14, you tag a mob and you pretty much generate what's commonly known as threat in World of Warcraft Classic. You generate a lot of threat, and it is very, very difficult to lose that threat throughout the period of you, even if you just so much as graze a mob, okay? Just tag it, even with a damage over time, a throw, a provoke, an AoE, anything like that. In Classic World of Warcraft, now some of you guys in retail, this might be similar to you, The reason why I've left you out is because I've not really spent an awful lot of time playing the game. In Classic World of Warcraft, you have to build up an adequate amount of threat. But there has to be a timescale where pretty much the majority of your party behind you, providing they're behind you and not running off doing something stupid.
Who the fuck was that? Crush him! What the fuck? Whelps! Left side! Even side! Many whelps! Now handle it! Fuck!
There has to be a time where your party pretty much stays stationary in their abilities to allow you to build up as much threat as possible to hold the mobs. Now, what I mean by hold the mobs is if you've got mages in your group, or you've got other classes that are dumping AoEs left, right, and center, like warlocks and stuff, for example, those abilities are going to generate so much threat towards them. Now, what tends to happen, for those of you that are not in the know, when a certain amount of threat builds up and overtakes the tank's threat, all of the enemies will change direction and go after the teammate with the highest amount of threat. When you're a tank, this is bloody terrible, because what happens is the pack then tends to split. You then get moaned at for not controlling the mobs, the mages can't AoE properly, and all hell basically breaks loose. Certain enemies, as far as I'm aware, can run into other packs and socially aggro each other in dungeons, and it just makes a bad experience even worse. So that's kind of the pain point number one that I kind of realized fairly early on that this is going to be a problem, because it sounds very simple, right? It sounds like, okay, well, I'll just pre-heal myself, I'll regen, try and build as much threat as possible, run straight in, tell my teammates to just wait for a little bit. But the issue is, when you're dealing with humans, humans don't listen. People are playing a game for fun, they pay a monthly membership because they want to play the game their way. Who are you to tell them otherwise? And unfortunately, whether a dungeon is set to take you 40 minutes on a good run, or whether it takes you an hour and a half, these people don't care. They'll just do whatever they see fit. The second problem is, and this is probably more specific to Druid, but in bear form, my attacks, please correct me guys if the warrior or any other tanks are different, but my attacks are so slow in bear form that trying to generate as much threat as I can to attach these mobs to me seems like it really does seem like an uphill struggle. Warriors seem to, I mean, there was a couple of warriors that I partied with, they seem to generate a lot of threat really, really quickly. They are obviously the designated tanks in this situation. But you just really struggle with generating as much threat as you can as quick as possible. Not only are you dealing with building it to an adequate amount to make sure that when the big damage attacks come in from your party members, that, you know, the mobs aren't splitting, but you're also contending with the fact that, okay, have I hit all of these enemies enough? Am I churning out attacks quick enough? And of course, at the lower levels, combat is slightly slower anyway, so that's kind of a given, right? Let's say, for example, in those situations, let's say you've done all of that correctly, okay? You're managing your resources correctly, you are grouping as many enemies together as you possibly can, you're generating as much threat as you can. You also can't account for the mishaps and the misfooting of people around you, and that's one thing I noticed really, really quickly. In a lot of these dungeons, there are what's known as patrols. There are packs of enemies that will just walk around, walk behind you, and they're one thing to deal with, because you've always got to be looking out behind you, and there's certain members of your party that could accidentally pull something.
Oh, there's two patrols. We're gonna kill this shit. And a respawn.
It's okay. Yo, make a portal, Chloe. Make a portal. Make a portal.
He calls for the fort. He calls for the fort. Holy crap.
What people need to bear in mind is that people in these dungeons don't always follow you as the tank. You know, ideally the tank carves out a designated path. You pull enemies, the tank tends to pull them, you then deal with them, you AoE them down, you move on. People in this game are, I mean, I'm new, so I guess I can't really say much, but people just run anywhere. Literally run anywhere. And what tends to happen is, if they get aggression from the enemies and they can't take it, instead of running to you so you can take the mob off of them, they'll just run like away, like run back towards the entrance, which then causes more chaos because you're then chasing them, but then you can't really chase them because you're getting dazed and stunned by enemies that are behind you. And it just creates this whole another kind of like level of just chaos, because then the healer's not focusing on you, it's focusing on potentially keeping your teammates alive. And if you all die and if you all wipe, you don't just respawn here. Let's just say for example that you avoid all of that. Okay, you avoid dying, you manage the mobs, everything seems to be going well. What I tend to think with the issues with sort of the lack of tanks, or the lack of readily available players to play tanks, I think truthfully a lot of people are bored of the backseating from players who aren't necessarily willing to play tanks themselves. They're willing to tell people where to go, tell people what to do. And just for the record, I'm fine with not knowing and someone be like, hey dude, just out of, you know, out of help to you, you might want to go over here first, you might want to do that. That's fine. But when there's people flaming people in the chat for not doing something correctly, when they're not willing to tank themselves, or, you know, they're playing like a DPS rogue and they're trying to like, I guess, shout the odds, I think that puts a lot of people off, because there is a certain element of pressure. Because even in classic non-hardcore, you've still got probably a minimum of an hour's worth of investment into a dungeon. So people don't want to mess up. You don't want to just get too greedy and, I don't know, if we pull the next pack, like, are we going to be able to clear it? Or am I being too greedy? Are we going to wipe? So there is that element of not only you're dealing with your own rotations, you're dealing with managing your own health bar. For example, on Druid, you're keeping some of your buffs active. You're making sure that typically before most pulls, you're popping regrowth. You're then into, I tend to use rejuvenation as well. Try and generate as much threat as possible and run in. So not only are you dealing with yourself, you're dealing with everyone else and the weight that comes with them as well. So I think another stress on top of that, this is going to sound a little bit convoluted. Not only are you looking out for yourself as a tank, your healer is almost like your second character in a dungeon. So you're looking at your stats. For me personally, I'm looking at my stats. Okay, have I got enough health? Am I going to make it through this pool? But I'm also then looking at my healer and thinking, right, has the healer got enough mana? Because if you start a massive pool at, I don't know, like half mana for the healer, that healer is going to be out of mana quite quickly. And mana does not last long in classic World of Warcraft. If you're a brand new player and you're like, yeah, I'm going to tank, I'm going to like be the bastion of the group, I'm going to run forward, charge forward into the face of adversity. If you don't know where you're going or the most effective tactical approach to a boss or to an area, you'll get flamed for that as well. Some people are nicer. Typically in classic, most experiences are nice, but you do get people like why the hell are you going this way? Like, what are you doing? And I do think, again, that is another element that people sit back and go, yeah, but I could just be a DPS and just follow people. I would say, honestly, like in terms of a ratio from tanks to DPS, it's like 1 tank to like 20 DPS. It's absolutely ridiculous. You guys can let me know down in the comments. This is just, I guess, just kind of been a bit of a spiel more than anything. If this is normal, fine. Like, I'd love to hear from you. If this is just an anniversary thing because people are off doing different things or leveling alts, then let me know as well. But hopefully this has kind of come across as like some of my thoughts on the subject and just a bit of my insight as a newer player and kind of what I've experienced, and mainly just a bit of a ramble as well. But if you guys enjoy this sort of like update and my journey throughout classic World of Warcraft as a new player, then feel free to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.